Chapter 6 of She and Allan. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. She and Allan by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 6. The Sea Cow Hunt. Now it had been my intention to push forward across the river at once, but here luck, or our old friend Fate, was against me. To begin with, several of Umslopogaas' men fell sick with a kind of stomach trouble, arising no doubt from something they had eaten. This, however, was not their view, or that of Umslopogaas himself. It happened that one of these men, Goroko by name, who practised as a witch doctor in his lighter moments, naturally suspected that a spell had been cast upon them, for such people see magic in everything. Therefore he organized a smelling out, at which Umslopogaas, who was as superstitious as the rest, assisted. So did Hans, although he called himself a Christian, partly out of curiosity, for he was as curious as a magpie, and partly from fear lest some implication should be brought against him in his absence. I saw the business going on from a little distance, and, unseen myself, thought it well to keep an eye upon the proceedings in case anything untoward should occur. This I did with Miss Inez, who had never witnessed anything of the sort, as a companion. The circle, a small one, was formed in the usual fashion. Goroko, rigged up in the best witch doctor's costume that he could improvise, duly came under the influence of his spirit, and skipped about waving a wild beast's tail, and so forth. Finally, to my horror, he broke out of the ring, and running to a group of spectators from the village, switched Thomaso, who was standing among them with a lordly and contemptuous air, across the face with a gnu's tail, shouting out that he was the wizard who had poisoned the bowels of the sick men. Thereon Thomaso, who although he could be insolent like most crossbreeds, was not remarkable for courage, seeing the stir that this announcement created amongst the fierce-faced Zulus, and fearing developments, promptly bolted, none attempting to follow him. After this, just as I thought that everything was over, and that the time had come for me to speak a few earnest words to Umslopogaas, pointing out that matters must go no further as regards Thomaso, whom I knew that he and his people hated, Goroko went back to the circle and was seized with a new burst of inspiration. Throwing down his whisk, he lifted his arms above his head and stared at the heavens. Then he began to shout out something in a loud voice which I was too far off to catch. Whatever it may have been, evidently it frightened his hearers, as I could see from the expression on their faces. Even Umslopogaas was alarmed, for he let his axe fall for a moment, rose as though to speak, then sat down again and covered his eyes with his hands. In a minute it was over. Goroko seemed to become normal, took some snuff, and, as I guessed, after the usual fashion of these doctors, began to ask what he had been saying while the spirit possessed him, which he either had, or affected to have, forgotten. The circle too broke up, and its members began to talk to each other in a subdued way, while Umslopogaas remained seated on the ground, brooding, and Hans slipped away in his snake-like fashion, doubtless in search of me. "What was it all about, Mr. Quatermain?" asked Inez. "Oh, a lot of nonsense," I said. "I fancy that witch doctor declared that your friend Thomaso put something into those men's food to make them sick." "I dare say that he did. It would be just like him, Mr. Quatermain, as I know that he hates them, especially Umslopogaas, of whom I am very fond. He brought me some beautiful flowers this morning which he had found somewhere, and made a long speech which I could not understand. The idea of Umslopogaas, that man of blood and iron, bringing flowers to a young lady, was so absurd that I broke out laughing, and even the sad-faced Inez smiled. Then she left me to see about something, and I went to speak to Hans and asked him what had happened. "Something rather queer, I think, Baas," he answered vacuously, "though I did not quite understand the last part. The doctor Goroko smelt out Thomaso as the man who had made them sick, and though they will not kill him because we are guests here, those Zulus are very angry with Thomaso, and I think will beat him if they get a chance. But that is only the small half of the stick," and he paused. "What is the big half then?" I asked with irritation. "Baas, the spirit in Goroko." "The jackass in Goroko, you mean," I interrupted. "How can you, who are a Christian, talk such rubbish about spirits? I only wish that my father could hear you." "Oh, Baas, your reverend father, the Predikant, is now wise enough to know all about spirits, and that there are some who come into black witch doctors, though they turn up their noses at white men and leave them alone. However, whatever it is that makes Goroko speak got hold of him so that his lips said, though he remembered nothing of it afterwards, that soon this place would be red with blood, that there would be a great killing here, Baas. That is all." "Red with blood? Whose blood? What did the fool mean?" "I don't know, Baas, but what you call the jackass in Goroko declared that those who are with the Great Medicine, meaning what you wear, Baas, will be quite safe. So I hope that it will not be our blood. Also that you will get out of this place as soon as you can." Well, I scolded Hans because he believed in what this doctor said, for I could see that he did believe it, then went to question Umslopogaas, whom I found looking quite pleased, which annoyed me still more. "What is it that Goroko has been saying, and why do you smile, Bulalio?" I asked. "Nothing much, Macumazahn, except that the man who looks like tallow that has gone bad, put something in our food which made us sick, for which I would kill him were he not Red Beard's servant, and that it would frighten the lady his daughter. Also he said that soon there will be fighting, which is why I smiled, who grow weary of peace. We came out to fight, did we not?" "Certainly not," I answered. "We came out to make a quiet journey in strange lands, which is what I mean to do." "Ah well, Macumazahn, in strange lands one meets strange men with whom one does not always agree, and then Inkosikaas begins to talk," and he whirled the great axe round his head, making the air whistle as it was forced through the gouge at his back. I could not get more out of him, so having extracted a promise from him that nothing should happen to Thomaso, who I pointed out was probably quite unjustly accused, I went away. Still the whole incident left a disagreeable impression on my mind, and I began to wish that we were safe across the Zambesi without more trouble. But we could not start at once, because two of the Zulus were still not well enough to travel, and there were many preparations to be made about the loads, and so forth, since the waggon must be left behind. Also, and this was another complication, Hans had a sore upon his foot, resulting from the prick of a poisonous thorn, and it was desirable that this should be quite healed before we marched. So it came about that I was really glad when Captain Robertson suggested that we should go down to a certain swamp formed, I gathered, by some small tributary of the Zambesi, to take part in a kind of hippopotamus battue. It seemed that at this season of the year the great animals always frequented the place in numbers, also that by barring a neck of deep water through which they gained it, they, or a proportion of them, could be cut off and killed. This had been done once or twice in the past, though not of late, perhaps because Captain Robertson had lacked the energy to organise such a hunt. Now he wished to do so again, taking advantage of my presence, both because of the value of the hides of the sea cows which were cut up to be sent to the coast and sold as sjamboks or whips, and because of the sport of the thing. Also I think he desired to show me that he was not altogether sunk in sloth and drink. I fell in with the idea readily enough, since in all my hunting life I had never seen anything of the sort, especially as I was told that the expedition would not take more than a week, and I reckoned that the sick men and Hans would not be fit to travel sooner. So great preparations were made. The riverside natives, whose share of the spoil was to be the carcasses of the slain sea cows, were summoned by hundreds and sent off to their appointed stations to beat the swamps at a signal given by the firing of a great pile of reeds. Also many other things were done upon which I need not enter. Then came the